Good afternoon and welcome to Plannercraft. I'm Natalie and I'm going to be taking you through a little bit with Affinity Designer. Today I'm going to be working on the iPad, but you can do exactly the same things on a PC or a Mac, just the buttons will be in slightly different places. If you aren't familiar with the Designer software, do go back and watch our introduction to Affinity Designer for a quick walk around. Okay, so I'm going to go for a new document. I'm going to go to one of my custom presets and I'm going to go down to scrapbook and go OK. So presets you can basically program yourself.
Mum said hi.
Hi Mum. We do have a man in comments, so if you want to say hi, ask a question, tell me to slow down a bit, feel free. So Ian set me a bit of a challenge today. So Ian wants to do steampunk. He's giving me shrug of shoulders now. Oh well. So let's start off some real basics. So if we go into our shape tool, you'll get a whole list of different shapes that you can use. And nice and easy, we're going to go for a cog. We're going to draw our cog by clicking the top left and dragging down to the bottom right. And on your iPad, if you press one finger onto the screen at the same time as your pen, or if you are using your finger, it's two fingers on your iPad or on your tablet, you can constrain to a point. Leave your finger on there until you've released your drawing finger or stylus. Okay. So to this cog, we're going to apply a colour, and we're going to go dark brown. Come here, little circle. I'll just click there. So really nice dark brown. Not quite black, but not far off. Okay. Now with your shape selected, we're going to go to our little three dot at the top. We're going to go duplicate, which will give us 2. Now, while we're moving our duplicate around, you'll notice it comes up with your red and green guidelines. So, the red and green, like so, saying that your shape and whatever shape underneath it is aligned to centre. Then we're aligning to points on the page. And we can keep going across on that red line to say we're keeping it horizontal to the other one.
I know, I'll be working in Affinity Designer and that's working on our iPad today.
Yeah, so it's exactly the same software, just it looks a bit different. When we have 2 green lines and our 3 red lines, that means it's horizontally level, but the tip of our second cog aligns to the centre of our first, and vice versa for the second green line. So you'll see, if I go down, we'll lose the red lines, but when we go back level, it snaps back to the red. Okay, so I'm going to decide which way I want my shadow to go to my main cog. So, with the second cog, I'm going to change it so that we can...
That's alright, Tracy.
What's that?
Just apologies for being late, she was playing with her alcohol inks.
Thought she might have been playing with Procreate. So, if we then drag that, we can start to decide where our shadow is going to go. Now at this point, our shadow is going to look pretty two-dimensional. As if you've got a piece of paper that's cut out to the shape of a cog and it's just raised up. So can everybody let me know that they've got this far?
I know people are joining if they're just watching. Just keep going.
Okay. I'm being told to keep going, not to me. So I'm going to duplicate that same cog again. And I'm going to stick it up over there for a minute. With my arrow tool selected, I'm going to deselect by clicking off the page. I'm going to go over the top of the two shapes. And then I'm going to go to the three dots and add. So we should now have a very funny looking shape.
There's no pre-create today. Since I've been watching your streams, I've been doing hand-on things.
Good,
and
good,
Zena
good.
says just watching, we'll play later.
Okay. So now we have our shadow layer underneath, and I'm going to align my cog back over the top. I'm going to go into my layers. I'm going to select my bottom layer, which is the shadow, and I'm going to go to the node tool. So if you're on a computer at this point, it's just press A to get there. I'm going to zoom in just to make life easier, so to do that on the iPad it's just a pinch outwards.
And Noana says just watching you play too.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is where I have a little inwards notch, if that makes sense, I'm going to delete it so that we join up. So we can do that all the way around. If it behaves, there we go. And you want to make sure you get the right one, so if you need to, zoom in a bit more. If your pen won't behave. Come on, there we go. And you can do this for any shape that you want to create a shadow for. Okay, so we now have a shadow, and that gives us the sense of it having weight, having substance. And now if we click off it, we have a 3D looking cog. So at this point, if you're going to do a cut file, you could just cut one layer out of, say, a light tan and one out of the chocolate and have it flat. But if you're printing, you might want to add a drop shadow. So I'm going to go back to my bottom layer. And let's go for on this one I'm going to go for an outer shadow. Okay. So you can do different blend modes until you get one that you're happy with. Now, first of all, I want to increase my radius. So when you're working on the iPad, you're going to click in the centre of your thing you want to change, and if you drag to the right, it'll go up. If you drag to the left, it'll go down. Sorry, am I not in a good place? The cable's annoying. There you go. That better? Okay, so that takes it upwards, and you can see we've got a very faint shadow that comes in. And if we do this one, it'll go upwards and it will become darker. We can offset it as well, which means that it starts to move around. Be careful with offset though, because you can start to make it look like it's floating rather than being sat down on something. And if we take our intensity up, we can see it becomes up a little bit crisper. Okay, that's a basic 3D technique. Any questions so far?
No.
No?
People are just watching, so.
Okay. People can still ask questions even if they're just watching.
I know.
Okay, so moving on from there. Going to select all of that, go into layers, and we can group it together. So that little symbol there on an iPad is the group button. So that's the middle of the layers palette. And we can click and drag it smaller or bigger. And that shadow layer will remain a constant, which is one thing to bear in mind. Now, if you are going to do a lot of, say, cogs and you want them all to have the same shadow, it's a good idea to note it down when you make that initial setting, because the worst thing you could do is have one going off this way, one going off that way, and yeah, it just looks a nightmare. So you want all your shadows to be consistent throughout. Okay, I'm going to open the floor to you. Come on, give me a challenge. Let's, while we're here, draw another one. And the undo button, should anybody be trying to find it, is actually in the history panel. You have to scroll all the way down to the bottom and just do a step up. Okay, so I'm just going to drag that one out of the way. I'll be transforming it. Thank you. And I need another duplicate. Try and judge it by the other one. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my shape control just because I want to play with these a little bit. So on the iPad version, where we would expect to usually have all our different options at the top of our screen, on the iPad it's at the bottom. So I'm going to change the number T to 6. So this is going to go a little bit inside in a bit. I'm going to take that right just in there. And I'm going to use 3 fingers to constrain it to the centre and in proportion. And I'm going to give it a different colour. Changing things on the fly here. My inner radius I'm going to bring out a little bit, and the whole radius can come out a bit. There we go. So we start to add some detail to our cog. Okay, and I think I'm happy with that one there. And
Okay, seeing as I'm not sure what all the buttons are for that, could you do a list that could be printed as I can't see where or what you are poking at?
okay. Let's see if we can zoom in. Just because I want to do... Yeah, that'll be better. Okay, can you flick over for me for a minute?
Just go over a bit by the looks of it.
Over a bit. Okay. There we go.
Back just a little bit.
To me. What do you
No, move your iPad up the desk a little bit.
Alright, okay.
That's it.
Okay, so in terms of the buttons on the iPad, we have a little arrow left button at the very top left hand corner that takes you back to your like gallery page and equivalent in Procreate. You have your arrow tool, which is your move tool, which is how you move stuff around, how you do basic resize. You have the next button down is your node tool. So if I convert this to curves first so you can see, oh don't be annoying, come on, down here. Convert to curves. So if we go on the node tool, that's how you can edit all your individual nodes. So if you saw when I was deleting stuff, use the node tool to do that. Then if I zoom right in so you can see this, we have
Definitely hand in the way.
the point transform tool, so that changes points from one. It's more so for when you're working with other things. The chances of you using it quite thin. But the one you are more likely to use out of the two is this one, the corner tool. You can use this on any node where it's square and it rounds off the corner. What I would say is if when you go to export to SVG for scanning cart, make sure you go back to convert to curves before you save it, because otherwise you tend to lose things like your rounded corners. If I zoom back out, the pencil tool is your freehand tool. Okay, so you can do things like sculpting. So if you watch some of the videos we were doing last week where I was doing freehand work, your sculpting tool actually enables you to change how a line goes without having to redraw the entire thing. Okay, but that only works when that is blue. When you turn it back off, it goes back to just being a normal pencil tool. Your vector brush tool means that you use a brush to paint with. Now, for the most part, you probably won't see much difference between using a thicker stroke. It's meant more for if you have the Apple Pencil, so that you have pressure control. That's when you would use your brush tool. So it really just depends on your setup for that one as to whether you'll use it or not. Your path tool. You start to draw a line by a single click. You press and drag for a curve. If you give another single click and click again, you'll get a corner point. Okay, so to repeat, click and drag gets you your curve, click just gets you a point. Your fill tool, so let's zoom back out to a shape which is filled and I'll just select my colour. Your fill tool, so you have different types of fill. At the moment it's set to a solid because it's that lovely orange colour. So if we go on it, we can change to a linear fill, which is a gradient, and it literally goes from one colour to another. if we click it along that point, we get another new node of colour, and at that point we can change it. So if we put a red in, you can see that the distance between points changes how sharply that colour changes. So because it's right down next to, come on, grab it. Because it's right down next to this point, you've got a much sharper point, whereas you've got a really gradual blend working back this way. And you can add as many points along that as you want, and they can all be totally different colours. So if you want to go and make it black here and purple here, goodness knows why you would want to, but you can do. There's no limit to the amount of colours that you can use, and that will just go straight across your shape. If we then change that to elliptical, this centre point here is the centre point of your blend, and you can either do it ovally or circularly. At the moment it's locked so that it will do aspect ratio, but if we untick the blue where it says aspect, we can play and we can actually put in galaxies. All you need is a little planet in the middle of that.
If you moved it across a bit where the white bit is, it would look like the centre is you.
If it would behave. Come on. There we go. And to make that a little bit bigger so it's a little bit more believable. And come on. You stretch out that way, that way, that way. And let's just make that endpoint black so at least it looks like it's supposed to be floating in a galaxy. A galaxy in a cog, there you go. Did not imagine drawing that today. So radial is a bit like linear, but it swings it round in a big circle. So this can only ever be a circle. So you'll probably want to align your point to the centre of your shape. A little bit more central than that would be good. Just sit. Come on. Only nickety. Come on. Get here. And we have conical.
That's quite cool too.
It's cool on any disc shape. If you do it on a circle, it looks a bit weird. So although it's supposed to look like it's conical, it really doesn't.
It does on the cone though, it looks cool. On the cog it looks cool.
Yeah, because you've got the variety of shapes. So if we zoom out, you can see all our dots go around the outside of our shape. So you can still go back, and you can even have those two dots as slightly different colours, and you get really sharp join there, which, yeah. Why you'd want to, I don't know, but it will do it if you want it to. And finally, we have bitmap. Now, bitmap is cool. So, let's go for, see if it will download this one. There we go. So you can actually place in a bitmap. You can control the size of the bitmap if it would behave. Come on. So, remember how I said aspect? There we go. We can bring it in. Come on, down a bit. Oh, 3D touches and all these lovely. History, undo. There we go. I'm just going to go back to filter and see if I can get this to behave. There we go. So let's drag this in and see if I can get the London Eye in the middle of my cog. This may be interesting. Come on. Kind of getting there. So I could have the London Eye going around my cog if I wanted to. And that's one of the reasons why I do love Affinity, is this ability to put photos in shapes nice and easily. It's really good for scrapbookers who want to do, you know, something a bit unusual. We don't always want to have rectangular photos. Sometimes, you know, different shape is good. The next button is transparency. So let's go back to our 3D one here. Let's say we want to reduce our transparency of our group. Now you can do it as linear, so again it goes from one to the other and we can do lots of points along the way. Now transparency is done in grayscale, so that means if it's white it's going to be see-through, if it's black it's going to be full strength, and any shade in between becomes like a percentage value of how transparent it is. So let's see if we can make it a bit more interesting, shall we? So I'm going to take that point down there and this point here, so we've got a kind of random looking metallic finish to it. I'm going to have a bit of a glow. If we then change it to elliptical, it works exactly the same way as the gradient fill, it's just working purely on transparency. So you still have all the same options up to but not including the bitmap. So you can't say use a photo to mask, you'd have to find other ways of working. It's not impossible, but there are ways of doing it. So, sticking with our group if it let us, let's do the vector crop tool. So this one's handy if you've drawn a shape but you only need part of it. So let's say you wanted to do the cog but you only want like a corner piece. Rather than having to draw it by hand, you can just crop it like so. And it crops it all for you. The only thing to bear in mind, if you do crop it, it won't extend your drop shadow past that point of the crop. It literally does crop everything that's in that container. The next tool is the shape tool. So that's where you access all your shapes. And they're well worth playing with because they all do more than what you think they do. So for instance, the cog can become a flower, it can become the stamens in your flower quite easily. So don't just think, oh it's a cog, I'm never going to use that because I don't draw cogs. Okay, you have your text tool. Now the only thing I would say about text on the iPad version is you are a bit limited to begin with the number of fonts that you can have. But what you do need to get is a cloud-based font manager. So if you can get one that will work with Affinity, then you can start to import fonts into that to be able to use on your iPad. But it's a bit of a long-winded way of going about it, but it will work eventually. You just got to be patient with it and find the setup that works for you. And finally we have the eyedropper, so let's say if I pick my little doodle over here, go to the eyedropper and pick up the orange, it'll pick up the orange fill and put an orange fill in it. Okay, so although this is drawn with a brush, the black line is still a stroke and not the fill. You have a little magnet that is your snap. You have a little rubbish bin, which is kind of self-explanatory. And then I'll do right side first before going up towards the top, because the top gets a bit more interesting, shall I say. Okay, so down the right hand side we have our fill, which has our top button. And you can use the colour wheel. You've got sliders. So if you go down here, you've got swatches. Now swatches are interesting because they'll have your recent colours, but you can also export palettes from the desktop version should you wish. You have greys, colours, gradients, and then you have your Pantone colours. So if you are going to prepare stuff for print, you can do it perfectly fine in Designer. You don't need to invest in Illustrator or anything fancy. Okay, so then if we go into stroke, because at the moment we've got our art brush section selected, it's gone into the art brush bit, so we can change width, and then this box here is the pressure, so you can drag that handle there, which is the end point. This handle here is your start point, and this is a bit like the gradient fill in that any point between this line is somewhere on the length of your shape. Okay, so if I do, let's take that fill out because that's annoying. Let's stick something bright in it just so it doesn't get confusing. So if we go up here and take this one down and this one down, thought they fixed this. Let's take that fill out. Come on, brush. They've still broken the pressure in. It's not working. Okay. Go to stroke then. Come on. I did remember how to learn. It's just not going to play ball. No. Do it on here. So same setting. Works the same way in both path as in solid stroke and in your brush. So if we go down and up and down and up, and we increase the width, you can see we can start to get a variegated line. Has anybody got any ideas yet for what you want to draw while I'm doing this? Okay, we have a dash line.
I think playing down, giving instructions is good because it gives people a good idea of what they're playing with. And so.
Okay. So, dash line, and we have the dash and the gap. So, let's go for something that hasn't got pressure applied to it. So, I'm going to go to that one. Come on. There we go. So, if you increase your gap, here's literally what it says. You're increasing the gap between your dashes. And if you increase your dash, you're making your dash line bigger. Okay? So you'll notice that the two are entirely independent of each other. So it's not like your gap is a percentage of your dash. So you can decide which bit works for you. So if you want to take it right down to 0, you can do. And that just basically means that what you have is the equivalent of a dot, dot, dot. Now, if you have the paper pricking set, that's a good way of creating a design for your paper pricking. But that will only work on DX models. Okay. We then have our caps for our line. So if we do let's do another path, and you can see now it's going to work with the stroke because it's just got the normal stroke. I want it to be a dash line for now. It's going to be annoying. Okay, I can do caps in this bit instead if it wants to be if it wants to do its own thing, I can do it in here. So let's put a bit of a end on that so you can see. So at the moment our cap is a rounded cap, and what that means is where your final point is, hang on, let's move that out of the way. So where your final point is on your line, it will actually come round the end of that line in a nice arc depending on the width of your line. Okay? So it's equivalent of putting a semicircle on the end of your line.
A little bit higher, please, sweetie.
Okay.
Down a bit.
Add a bit. Add a bit. front. Is that upside down? You're making people watch it upside down, Ian.
It wasn't really.
No wonder people are struggling. Why didn't you say it was upside down?
Yeah, so no.
Okay. So, just to quickly go through it again. So we got arrow tool, node tool, corner rounder tool, pencil tool, art brush, path tool, fill tool, transparency, crop, shape, text, and eyedropper. Okay. So our caps are the endpoints. So as I was saying, it basically puts a semicircle on the end. If we go to that one, it finishes flush on that point. Now, the time you would use that is if you are doing something with a scan and cut, you want to use that cap. Okay?
Tina says she was doing okay. It was okay upside down. But it's up the right way now for you as well, so make it a bit more sense.
Yeah. Honestly. It would have been alright for Tracy being Australian, maybe.
It's up the right way down there.
So, and finally on the last cap, you have it as a square end that extends beyond the end point. And to be honest, the chances of you using that last one are like never gonna happen.
No.
So for most things, when you're drawing for like a digital stamp, you'll have a rounded end that goes past the end of the point. And if you're drawing for your scan and cut, you can just have it so it ends flush. The join down here is for when you get to corners, so let's get a corner, shall we? Let's make a corner, just because. Let's try to be clever now. Come on. Give me my note tool. And sharp. There we go. So, there's a nice sharp corner for us. Go back to my stroke. So you join this how it goes round a corner. So you can see at the moment it's nice and smooth, which for 99% of the time is what you're going to want. You can do a beveled edge, or you can do a sharp edge.
Oh dear. Tracy turned it upside down. Her iPad upside down to match. Love. You can turn it back the other way now, Tracy. It's right up there.
Could do a drink. Okay. So the next three shape things it's asking you. Let's get another shape so you can put a stroke on it. Come on, thank you. Put a stroke on it, not that much. Okay. So at the moment we have a closed shape, and this is important because it needs to know that there is an inside and an outside for this next bit. So typically our line will be, our stroke is aligned to our line, so that our line goes through the centre of the stroke. So if you've got a stroke that is 6, your line is at 3. Okay? We can then choose instead to align our line to the inside of our path. Okay? So if you think that you've got your 6, you're now saying that that 6 is on the inside, presuming your shape's coming around that way. And likewise you can go around the outside. Now, the time that we use these two are when we're looking to use an offset either to the outside or to the inside. At the moment, Designer does not have an offset function at the moment. I'm sure it will become, but it's not there yet. So the way that we have to do it is we have to set it either to the outside or inside, depending which way we want to go. We set our stroke to how much of an offset we want, and then we can go to our little 3 dots at the top, and we can go expand stroke. Okay, and then what you would do is you would weld your stroke in your original shape to get your offset. mitre limit is again unlikely for you to use unless you find that you're getting a very specific problem. So if when you're doing your bevel, for instance, or you're finding something isn't quite working right, that's when you can use mitre to try and fix it. But for the most point, you want to leave it alone. If it ain't broke, don't mess it. And you can also do your border, so whether you want your stroke in front of your shape or behind it. To be honest, there's very little chance of you ever wanting to use that, but it's there if you want it. Okay, so brushes, going back to our brush tool, as I said, in terms of the iPad version, brushes work best when you have something that is pressure sensitive. So if you have an Apple Pencil, or I believe there's a Wacom one that you can use that is pressure sensitive, or if on Android you are using a separate graphics tablet, because you can, then brushes really do lend themselves to your work. You'll find that if you do get into the Digistamp side of creation, or if you want to make your own planner stickers, or if you want to do illustration work, brushes are going to really help you to create a more, what's the word I'm looking for?
Unique?
No, accomplished illustration. So if everything is flat and boring, it's not necessarily going to look like you have kind of thought it through, maybe. It's just that case of going that little bit further. But if you don't have a pressure sensitive stylus, we just have to fold it other ways instead. Or use a PC or a Mac with a graphics tablet. So next button is our layers button, and it looks like a sandwich. So this is where you find all your layers. Now I do apologise because I've done a load of black on a black interface. So if we go down this way, so I can zoom in here. So with your layer palette you can move things up and down, so come click, so we can move it up our list. We can actually make it so that it's part of another shape. So when it insets like this, what it actually means is we can actually put it as part of another shape, which is somewhat insane. So if we pop it in here, you can see it actually puts it as a fill to another shape. Now there are times when you would want to use this, believe it or not.
The thing that says get an ice cream, please.
Oh, yeah. Ice cream's all around when all this is over. Didn't help. I saw a report on an ice cream type and I was like, no, okay, no, not gonna do that. But there is actually one that you can actually pre-book. Oddly enough, it's the one that we used to get the ice cream from after school. For those of you that watch the other day.
And Tracy says we've gone to bed, so don't take all the toys, please.
At the moment, I think I'll be throwing them off.
See what I do.
Melting. Okay, so
That's a poor attempt at melting there.
go on then. So occasions when you're going to want to use this are if you want to do things like shading to a shape. So for instance, my poor cog. Let's put in a cog. And we're going to give it a fill. And just because it's Pantone, I'll put it in that. Come on. It's because it's put it in the same shape, isn't it? No, come here. Come here, Mr. Cog. So there's our cog with our funky stroke. That, well, yeah, okay. And let's say we want to make it look like it has a shadow on the inside. We can duplicate our shape if it's selected. There we go. Drag it over. Let's give it a different colour. Let's go for that one. And get rid of that stroke because it's daft. Okay. So I just want to slightly offset it so you can see what's going on. Come on. Zoom in. There we go. Okay, so if we go to our layers and we take our cog and we bring it down so it's inside, so on the iPad it will put a blue line through the centre of the layer underneath. On the Mac and PC it will drop in a little blue line that is inside. Okay, so you can notice that it's applied our shape to the inside of this one, so you can actually, if we zoom out, you can see that it actually sits inside that shape and it is editable, so we can stretch it. And that's a really cool way of, let's say we wanted to add a shadow to a face, we can do that, and it doesn't have to match perfectly. So if we've got that's quickest way of doing a face, let's do it on the lips. It's going to be the world's dodgy skin colour, but and we take our pen tool and we go, right, okay, what to do? I'll take the stroke off in a minute, not the bolt. Okay, no stroke, and need to go a little bit darker. There we go. Just gonna go back to my layers. Pick up my layer, it will be there we go, like so, and then you just drop it in. So you can see our outside line doesn't really matter at all, and when that comes to actually printing you won't see the pink lines, that's just there for your guide. But of course if you then want to change that you can do. So you can still go to the node tool and do it that way if you want to.
You're drawing upside down now.
Huh? No, I'm not drawing upside down.
Okay.
Or if we want to use the pencil tool and sculpt it, we can do. So if we want to go and draw it more around that way, we can do. Smooth that out. And we can pop on a bit of a shadow. And likewise if we want to. Perfect, there we go. That's a really good way of starting to develop like sort of flat coloured logos and things like that. Okay, so let's say you want to go one step further. Well, before we do that, I'll finish off down this side because there's a whole side of this program that I haven't shown you really. So we'll keep going down here until we go up there, and then I can show you some of it. So appearance is literally what it says. It tells you the stroke, it tells you the fill and any effects if you have them on it. Your assets, are probably going to be totally ignored by most of you for most of the time. So assets are like libraries that you can set up, but the chances of you using them in day-to-day crafting are like so small that it's unlikely you will ever use them.
Do you sort of want to print it though? If you're printing it rather than...
No. Basically it's there for if you were doing multiple numbers of documents with the same stuff in them. So if you were doing like a series of educational leaflets and you wanted to have the same logo, the same icons, then you would use it. But the rest of the time, it's not going to happen. The thing to bear in mind with all software is, the chances of you using all of it are very slim. But they hedge their bets as to how you're going to use it and what you want to use it for. We have the access to stock images as part of Affinity Designer. So you can then bring in stock images directly into your application. They are all provided by third parties, so you do need to check their terms and conditions. And for the most part, I haven't subscribed to any of them. I am a member of Pixabay, but that's about it. Because they're a good source for pictures for drawings. Next we have symbols which you can sync with your desktop. You have your FX, so this is how you do your blur, glows, shadows, if you want to do 3D effects, beveling, embossing, and also colour overlay and gradient overlay. So if you want to do something that's a bit more complex than your typical drawing, you can use the overlays to help you out a bit. Adjustments. Now these are useful for if you're importing photos as well. You can do all your usual adjustments that you would do in Photoshop. So you can change things to black and white, you can do your bright and contrast, you can do your channel mixes. So what I will do is I will do a separate stream on all of these, just because it's getting into processing photos. And we have the text options. So as you can see, we have a few in there that we can play with, but certainly not as many as what you would have on your computer. And in your texting you also have your put your teeth in. All your character and paragraph controls. Now transform is probably going to be the one that you go to most often. So this is how you can flip and rotate items as per usual. It's also how you can check the size of things as well, which is the other reason why I use it a lot. And you can also change position in here. So if you're finding that dragging this around is getting really annoying and you can't get it to line up right, you can just do it in transform. And the anchor is for when you're resizing, so whether you wanted to do it from the centre point, top left, and so on and so forth. So if you know that something is dead on where you want it, pin it to that point and then go from there. We have alignment options as well. So with 2 or more shapes selected, you can do alignment, whether that's left, middle or right, or top, middle or bottom. And you can also constrain how things are moving. So if you want to constrain it to aspects, you can do. And if you want to do max fit and min fit. But 9 times out of 10, now going to use it. So for the most time you'll go into here or into the alignment options. Navigator is useful because if you're zoomed in like I am at the moment, number one, you can see a preview all the time of your entire work. So if you're working on something really big, you can see a little version of it. and you can also move it around if it will let me. So you can zoom in. It's not going to let me do it now. Oh dear, it's having one of those days. Pen doesn't like me today. Made it work too much. You can also rotate your canvas. So if you are used to working at an angle, you can do. So you can unlock it, then you can do it with your fingers, like so, or you can do it with your left-right motion, or up-down. But for now I'm just going to pop it back to 0. So with any dialer option, if you tap in the middle, it will come up with what looks like a calculator, and we can just type 0 and OK. Now the reason it comes up like a calculator is because it can be really clever. So if you want to create boxes and things, the additions and subtractions really will help. So it's a great way of working, and you can work the same way on a Mac or a PC. You literally type into your dimension box, let's say 5 plus 10. In case you can't work out, that's 15. But it can be useful to just do that in your own head as well. That you know that you've catered for like a side and a side, depending.
37 and 49, daft things like that. But
yeah. Or when it gets to like 0.222. Yeah.
Yes. This isn't a maths test day. You're alright.
I got an A in maths. Okay. So then history, which is a really useful one. So your basic undo is just click up one notch. Okay. But what history can actually do is you can go all the way back. So we can actually go right up to a point, and you'll notice if something changes, it does a little diverge logo. So that says you went back before and then you went forward again. So it's a good pointer for if you've lost something, you can always go back. That's what I like about this. No such thing as a mistake. Snapshots. Snapshots are useful for if you reach a stage and let's say you're briefing it to a customer, you take a snapshot. So that then you can have a register of the amends that they've made, for instance, if you're charging for them, which you should be. Okay, to come back up to the top, our first button, which looks like a little SD card for some reason. You have convert document, you have resize, which is quite obvious what it does. It resizes your artboard rather than an individual shape. You can export it to SVG, for instance. So if we go to export, I'll just go through the options that you have. So you can see mine's used to go into SVG, and I have a few.
Yeah, we can see you.
Huh?
We can see you.
What?
See your reflection in the screen, so we can see you.
Well, at least I'm not invisible.
You have a reflection. Yay!
Distracting me there, dear. We have text as curves, which would usually be blue. I don't know why I've turned it off. Okay, so text as curves basically takes any text that you put in and renders it as curves if you've forgotten to. So that can be a good way to save your blushes when it comes to suddenly going to a like export it to Canvas or whatever, and then Canvas goes nope. You won't believe the number of times that Canvas will throw a hissy fit because the text hasn't been properly sent to curves. You can flatten transforms as well. So remember how I was saying about the corner rounder? That's a good one to have in there if you haven't done your convert to curves after you've rounded your corners. So a lot of these will kind of catch your mistakes. So don't worry too much about making a mistake. include bleed you're probably never going to use in SVG, so don't worry about it, which is why it's greyed out. If we switch to say something like a PDF, we have some different options in here. Now I haven't got bleed set up on my document, but if I did it would be white here, and then you can turn it blue if you were sending it to print. So in case you don't know what bleed is, it's the area outside your artboard that goes to the printer, and he uses that in his tolerances when he's cropping your artwork. So if you didn't put bleed on, you risk having a white edge because they can never cut it spot on. You can export to Photoshop if you want to. So a lot of software these days can read Photoshop files, so it's another useful one. And then up in this top row, the first four are pretty much your standard images. So if you're going to web, you can go to PNG, or you can go to JPEG if it's for an older site. And if you want to do animated GIFs, if you really want to go there, you can. But for now, I'll just cancel that. Go back to our little SD card. So carrying on down, we can save a copy of our design. So let's say we've got sofa and we're like, well actually I like that, but I don't want to replace the original. You can save a copy and up. We have export as a template. So with templates, these will work in both iPad and Mac and PC versions. So if you have something that you frequently want to set up, like a page with a logo for instance for copyright, go with template. The next button is print, and that depends on you having a Wi-Fi or AirPrint printer. So we're fortunate to have one, aren't we? So I can print if I need to. Place image, which just means literally import an image. Artboards. So at the moment I have one artboard, which is where all my drawings are occurring on, but you can have multiple artboards in the same document. So if you go back and watch the big stream where we did the crafting collection, you'll notice we had multiple artboards in that file. And that's a good way of working on a group of things at once, where you're going to be using like images and symbols. Then we have canvas, so you can have clipped canvas and transparent canvas should you wish. You also have your snapping, gridding, guide control in here. So snapping is when it locks to a point, whether that point is an object or a guide or onto the grid. You can set up a grid to the specifications that you need it to. So if you need it to centimetres, that's fine. If you need it to inches, that's fine. If you need it to 0.575 centimetres, that's perfectly fine too. So you can break it right down if you want to. Bleed, as I just said, is where we go outside of our artboard for printers. Assistant is annoying, so we'll ignore it. Just think paperclip, Microsoft Office.
Yeah. Puppy at the bottom.
And your defaults. Next one along is our little 3 dots. So this is where you get the majority of your shape actions. So we have duplicate, cut, copy, paste, paste inside. So if you want to paste something inside a shape, you can do. Paste style. So if you want to copy a style from one thing and paste it to another, you can do. And you can paste effects in the iPad version, which is interesting because you can't do that on the Mac or PC. There you go. A little bit of trivia for you. Geometry. You have add, subtract, intersect, divide and XOR. So add is pretty obvious, it's going to weld it all together. And shapes don't have to overlap in Affinity to weld. If you go to subtract, it's going to take it away. So the front shape gets taken away from the back shape. Intersect, so where the two shapes overlap, becomes a shape and the rest of it gets deleted. Divide. So basically 2 shapes would become 3 shapes. So you have the original 2 shapes and then where they overlap becomes a new shape. And XOR means that it actually deletes the section that overlaps. In our next column we have select all, which is kind of obvious. And when you have something selected, you can have group, ungroup and ungroup all. Convert to curves takes any shape to a curve instead, so you can edit nodes. Note if you're going to do that with a cloud or a cog or any other repeating shape that you want to make all your edits before you press convert to curves, because once you do, they'll all act independently. Expand stroke basically takes that stroke and converts it to a shape. Merge curves and separate curves you're probably never going to use, unless you really want to get into the nitty gritty. Insertion targets, again, you are probably never going to use, and the film mode you can just ignore, just leave as is. Then these 3 buttons here relate to the persona, which is the term that they use. So for most of the time you're going to be working in this one here, which is the vector persona. So that basically means that you're working entirely with vectors, which is what your scan and cut needs you to do. Okay, if we then go into pixel mode and do any work at all, that document then has very little value to your scan and cut, because you are going to start upsetting it. Okay, it has its benefits for doing so. So if you are going to do print and cut, at this point before you do anything, take all your cut files and group them into one group and call them cut, and so you know that you don't want to turn any of that into a pixel layer. So with the pixel persona selected, we still have our move tool, and now we have a paintbrush. So if we go down here and click a shape, so I'm going to click on my little egg because that's what's going to come in a minute, and if we go to our layers, so we can still see that we have our 2 elements there. If we go to brush and apply a brush stroke, you can see straight away that the assistant pops up to tell us it's added a pixel layer. So if we're setting this to the scan and cut now, or even to canvas, what would happen is it would pull through the curve and the oval, and then it would place the pixel as a separate image, totally not related to where that shape is on the mat. Okay, it can't treat it as a group, it just shoves it off somewhere up a corner. So if you're having problems with things saying that they're not on the mat, it can be an image that's just being annoying and not where it should be. So let's say I want to erase that out, because now I have my layer. Go back to my brush and let's go for a little bit blue. And let's go for it's going to be a speckled egg, just because I can. Now you'll notice if I go like this, it stays cropped to the shape. So don't ever think you're going to struggle to draw with this, because it's absolutely fine, because you haven't got to worry about going outside of the lines. So if you want to you can use your tabbing to blend it in if you want to. And there's lots of cool effects that you can do with the brushes. So like I said, you can do this to your heart's content if you know you're going to print it. The only thing is, if you're going to go to and send it to scan and cut, it won't work. So what you need to do is have that separate group that you can export. Okay, so going down the side we have our eraser. So here you go. No, I want that bit there. Take that bit out. You have a pixel tool. Now that means literally nitty gritty what it says. And you never want to get that far. So, smudge tool. And again, that's what it says on the tin. You can smudge it, it's not going to go outside the lines, we can blend, we can play. We have a flood fill tool. So if you go let's go for that one, and tolerance, let's make it 100. It will just fill everything. Okay, but like I said before, we still have access to our history panel exactly the same way, and we can go backwards. Smart selection. So what that basically does is like the old magic wand from Photoshop. So if it's within a certain tolerance, then you can select it and it will select everything else that matches it. Lasso. So if you want to just select a area, and then let's say we change our brush to a different colour. We can go like that, and it will only go where we have it selected. And likewise we have a separate couple of magic ones for you to choose from. And finally, a colour picker tool, which is what I was probably looking for earlier.
Wrong program.
Yeah, wrong program. As I said, too many programs, constantly changing between them. So finally, we have our export persona. Now, the chances of you doing very much in here are few and far between. For what you want to use, you can just use the layer panel to control what you're exporting or not exporting. So just by making them invisible or visible. The main time when you have to use the export persona is if you need to slice up an image, and by that I mean proper old-fashioned web design where you need to slice and dice to be able to get it to do different buttons and things like that. So these days, not too common to use. You can do everything else by HTML these days. So if we go back to our vector persona and go to our layers, we can now see that we have a pixel layer and a curve. And if we want to at any point, we can just ditch the pixels. So don't think, oh, I've gone to a pixel layer, I can't do it. Just do that. Delete it. Okay. Any questions?
How to get rid of your marching ants?
Okay, marching ants. Just click off it with the lasso tool.
But you have to do it in that mode, because obviously you couldn't have done that in...
No, because you haven't got access to the lasso tool.
So, yeah, that's what I mean. So if you do put something on in a different persona, you can only control it within that persona. So you have to keep between the two to...
Yeah.
Not a daft question, it's just a...
No such thing as a daft question. Any questions at all?
No, I don't think so.
No? No requests either?
No.
Nobody said that, Chair. Most disappointed.
And Carol's not on today. I haven't seen Carol on. I don't know if she is on or not.
Oh.
She's hiding today.
if that's it, I might call it a day for today.
That sounds like a plan. Ready for Peter Paul?
Yeah.
So
if you are interested in more in-depth tuition in either version, we have got a course that is coming up next Saturday. So you just need to purchase entry, follow the link.
So you just said house.
House. A house. Quick house. Don't want a blue house though, that was a bit odd. So let's change colour. So at least it looks a little bit like a brick house. It's a very colourful brick house, but yeah. So I'm going to build a roof. And I'm going to change the colour. Now with your shape tool still selected, I'm going to alter the pitch of my roof a bit so that it comes in line with it. So if you saw that and it's snapped, that's saying that both points are equal. Okay. And then I want it to have the green lines there to say that's central. Let's go to this is a very basic little house. And let's put a window in here. Drop in another one. And I'm going to give that a kind of blue tinge, but don't really want much saturation to it. There we go. Just going to drag that down. Going to duplicate it. Oh. Okay. Put it in the centre. And another little rectangle to give a window ledge. Now if we go up here, you can do a little bit like that. Need about another two, I think. Just want to move it back across a bit. Okay. So let's take all those layers and group them. So I'm going to duplicate that group. And again. And if you see, if we're doing a tower block, you'll be alright, because once you've done it once and then duplicate, it goes upwards. or crossways or however you've moved it. And big windows in this house. It's just that door, so it's a little bit more realistic, shall we?
You put a letterbox with a knocker on it.
Oh no, not knockers again.
I'll just put a letterbox in.
Yeah, I'll do a letterbox.
A door handle.
And the door handle.
Don't ask for much.
Okay, so letterbox. Let's give it a kind of goldy colour. And we can put fill in it and go linear. I'm going to put it on an angle just because these things usually are.
That's just our letterbox then.
The fill there. Okay, and I'm going to go for a lighter colour for that bit. There we go. So we have a shiny reflective letterbox. Now I'm going to zoom in because I'm going to use path tool. Going to put a lilac in it, take the stroke off. And what should I go for? Let's put a golden glow on it.
This is now just needs an interest. You can put a house number on the outside.
You want me to do a door handle first, don't you?
Yeah, people they need to be able to get in. Yeah.
So let's take that one and duplicate it just because it's easier than trying to redo all that fill again. Then let's move it up from above the letterbox, otherwise that'd be annoying. And I'm going to go back to my rectangle tool. And let's go for that colour there. Okay. So I want to put a house number on it.
Mhm.
Okay.
Or name.
And let's go for. I don't really want to go for Arial because that's just boring. Going to go condensed, and let's use that same goldy colour. Make a big house number just because you can. There we go. Voila! Just because I can't help but mess.
Oh, you know.
Go for it.
That eco screen is it?
It's thieves. There we go.
There we go. Right. Stop fiddling. Leave it alone.
Can't help it. There we go. The last.
It's beautiful. Right, we'll leave it there for today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll try and be good and not add shadows and everything else that I used to do to houses.
I think it says it needs a chimney. And some smoke.
Some brown. There we go. That brown. And some smoke.
Yeah.
I'm going to be
Oh,
really
coal
lazy
fire.
with my smoke.
Do cloud.
Yeah. Just because I
Orange clouds. Coming out of our orange house.
Oop.
There you go. Right.
Yeah, their chimney's on fire.
Yeah. It's an old coal fire, that's what it is. So there's lots of smoke coming out of it. Back tomorrow?
Mhm.
And what are we doing tomorrow?
Tomorrow I had something else in mind for tomorrow. Oh, colouring tomorrow, isn't it?
Oh, I'm having a colouring day tomorrow.
We're having a colouring day to give me eyes a break from the computer because we're trying to be good, aren't we?
Yeah.
I didn't sound very convinced. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Right, so thank you all very much. Stay safe. Enjoy the rest of your day, evening, whichever it may be, morning. And we will see you all tomorrow. Don't forget, Peter's on at 4 o'clock today, I believe, doing his make a card. I would say I believe because I didn't see it. So. What you I did. Turrets. And right, stay safe. And
Do you want to just flip back to the other view?
the other view, so
Yeah.
you can see the iPad.
There you go. So you can
There you
see
go.
it better.
So once again, thank you all very much, and we look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Bye.